I remember the exact moment the ruthless billionaire who broke me fell to his knees, his agonizing sobs echoing through the sterile hospital room. He shattered my mind, locked me away, and starved my biology until my mating gland literally died. But this isn't a tragedy. It's my revenge. It was raining the day I was sold. The relentless freezing drizzle of a Seattle November mirrored the absolute dread settling in the pit of my stomach. My name is Finian Lowell, and I was 22 when my life was reduced to a line item on a debt ledger. My father, a desperate man with a failing logistics company, had embezzled $4 million from Langdon Enterprises. When he was caught, the CEO didn't call the police. He looked at my father's file, saw that he had an unmated Omega son, and drafted a contract. I was the collateral, a live-in debt repayment. Victor Langdon was a myth made flesh in the corporate world. An alpha of terrifying pedigree, he was notoriously ruthless, emotionally barren, and deeply resentful of the primal dynamics that governed our society. He viewed Omega biology not as something to be cherished, but as a chaotic weakness that needed to be managed, suppressed, and controlled. When I was dropped off at his sprawling, brutally minimalist penthouse overlooking Puget Sound, I was terrified. I had heard the rumors, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of living under his iron fist. Victor didn't touch me. Not at first. If he had hit me or forced himself on me, it would have been a crime I could define. Instead, his torture was clinical, psychological, and perfectly legal. He hated my scent. Before I met him, I smelled like warm vanilla and sweet cedar, a comforting, gentle aroma. Victor found it distracting. Within 24 hours of my arrival, he brought in a private physician on his payroll who prescribed a heavy synthetic inhibitor called Zifracor 9. You will take this every morning at 7. Victor told me his voice, a low, vibrating baritone that sent a spike of submissive panic straight into my nervous system. His own scent, petrichor and sharp, dark espresso, was weaponized, flaring with absolute command. I will not tolerate a house reeking of omega distress or heat hormones. You will remain utterly neutral. Zifracor 9 wasn't just a suppressant. It was an experimental chemical bludgeon. It didn't just mask an omega's cycle. It paralyzed the mating gland at the base of the neck, starving it of the natural hormonal ebb and flow it needed to survive. Taking it felt like swallowing crushed glass. Within weeks, my vanilla scent thinned out to nothing. I felt constantly cold, shivering in a penthouse that was kept at a rigid 68 degrees. Victor's cruelty was relentless. He isolated me entirely. My phone was confiscated. My only contact with the outside world was through a burner phone my best friend Leon Brooks had secretly slipped into my coat pocket on my last day of freedom. I kept it hidden beneath the loose floorboard in the stark white guest room I was assigned. To an omega isolation and a lack of alpha scent bonding is a form of physiological starvation. Our bodies are wired for pack, for warmth, for tactile reassurance. Victor knew this. He intentionally neutralized his own scent in the common areas, leaving the penthouse smelling of bleach and ozone. He would only unleash his pheromones when he wanted to punish me. I remember the lowest point of those early months. It was a Tuesday in late January. The chemical suppressants had triggered a phantom heat, a terrifying condition where the body craves a nest and an alpha, but the paralyzed gland cannot produce slick or the proper hormones, resulting in agonizing muscle spasms. Blind with instinctual panic, I had dragged 3 of Victor's discarded cashmere sweaters from the laundry room into my closet, desperately trying to build a nest. I just needed something that smelled like him even faintly to calm the violent shaking in my limbs. Victor found me curled in the dark. I looked up, tears streaming down my face, my chest heaving. Instead of an alpha's protective instinct kicking in his eyes, went flat with disgust. "Pathetic," he sneered, crossing his arms. He didn't offer a soothing purr or a comforting touch. Instead, he called the housekeeper. "Gather these up, have them incinerated, and thoroughly sanitize this closet. He's shedding like an animal." As the housekeeper took the sweaters away, a sharp, tearing pain shot through the back of my neck. My mating gland throbbed a warning sign I was too naive to understand. I curled into a tight ball on the bare hardwood floor, sobbing until I threw up. Victor stood in the doorway entirely unmoved, watching me break. He wanted an Omega who existed only as an obedient ghost, a silent trophy of his absolute dominance. For 6 agonizing months, he got exactly what he wanted. He systematically dismantled my spirit, leaving nothing but an empty shell. But he didn't realize that in breaking the Omega, he was destroying the very biology he thought he could control. By April, the dull ache in the back of my neck had become a constant localized agony. It felt as though a hot coal had been lodged under my skin, right where my mating gland sat. When I touched the area, the skin was feverish, and the subtle soft swell of the gland had hardened into a rigid, painful knot. I knew something was fundamentally wrong. My vision would blur with sudden, violent migraines. My appetite vanished completely, leaving me gaunt and hollow-eyed. I didn't tell Victor. I knew exactly what he would say. He would accuse me of attention-seeking, of letting my baser biology act up to inconvenience him. He would just increase the dosage of the Zifracor 9. So I swallowed the pain, hiding my grimaces behind a blank mask whenever he was in the room. The breaking point arrived on the evening of the annual Langdon Holdings Charity Gala. It was a high-profile event held at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in downtown Seattle. Victor required me to attend. I was to be his accessory, a silent, beautiful Omega on his arm to prove to his shareholders that he was a stabilized domestic alpha, capable of maintaining a household. Before we left the penthouse, Victor handed me a thick velvet choker lined with heavy metal, a scent-blocking collar. "Put it on," he commanded, adjusting his bespoke tuxedo in the mirror. "Victor, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. The skin over my gland was agonizingly tender. Even the brush of a shirt collar made my eyes water. "I don't smell like anything. The pills. I don't need the collar. Please. It hurts." He turned slowly, his alpha aura flaring with sudden suffocating intensity. The air in the room grew heavy, pushing me down. "Did I ask for your opinion, Finian? You will wear it, and you will not embarrass me tonight." He closed the distance between us, snatched the collar from my shaking hands, and fastened it around my neck himself. He pulled it tight. I let out a choked gasp as the rigid metal pressed directly against the inflamed, hardened knot of my gland. Black spots danced in my vision, but I bit the inside of my cheek until it bled to keep from screaming. The gala was a blur of flashing cameras, clinking champagne flutes, and the overwhelming, chaotic mix of high society perfumes. I stood by Victor's side for 2 hours, a perfect porcelain doll. But beneath the tuxedo, my body was undergoing a catastrophic failure. A cold sweat drenched my spine. The pain in my neck was no longer a dull burn. It was a sharp, jagged, tearing sensation, as if the nerves were being pulled out by the roots. Victor noticed me swaying. Annoyance flashed across his sharp features. He gripped my upper arm tightly, his fingers bruising the flesh. "You look completely washed out. Your drawing stares," he hissed. "Go up to the VIP suite, room 412. Wait for me there and don't come out." He shoved the keycard into my palm and turned back to the mayor of Seattle with a charming, fabricated smile. I barely made it to the elevator. The ride up to the 4th floor felt like it took hours. By the time I swiped the keycard and stumbled into the lavish, dimly lit suite, I couldn't breathe. I tore at the velvet collar, my fingers slipping on the cold sweat coating my skin. I managed to pop the clasp, throwing the heavy metal piece across the room, but the relief didn't come. Instead, a sudden blinding pop resonated inside my skull. It wasn't a sound, but a physical snapping sensation at the base of my neck. I fell to my knees, clawing at the expensive carpet. A sound ripped from my throat, a horrific, guttural wail of pure biological agony. It felt like a vital organ was liquefying inside me. I reached back, my fingers pressing against my neck. When I pulled my hand away, my fingertips were smeared with thick, dark fluid, leaking from the pores of the skin over the gland. Then the world went terrifyingly dark. I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor and the overwhelming scent of clinical sterility. I was lying in a bed at St. Jude's Advanced Care Facility. My neck was heavily bandaged, and my body felt uniquely deeply empty. It was a profound, echoing void, like waking up and realizing you had gone entirely deaf. A doctor stood at the foot of my bed reviewing a chart. He was an older beta with kind, tired eyes. His name tag read, Dr. Harrison Mercer. "You're awake, Mr. Lowell," Dr. Mercer said, gently stepping forward. He didn't offer a reassuring smile. His expression was grave. What happened?" My voice was a raspy whisper. I tried to reach for the back of my neck, but an IV line pulled taut. "You collapsed at the Fairmont," Dr. Mercer explained, his voice even and professional, though laced with undeniable pity. "Hotel staff heard a disturbance and found you unresponsive. You were rushed here. Mr. Lowell, I need to be direct with you. The toxicology reports came back. The levels of synthetic inhibitors in your system, specifically a black market grade variant of Zifracor, were lethal to your endocrine system." He pulled up a chair and sat down, leaning forward. "We had to operate immediately to save your life. But the damage to the localized tissue was absolute. You suffered complete ischemic glandular necrosis." I stared at him, my brain sluggishly trying to translate the medical terminology. Necrosis. The tissue died. "Finian," Dr. Mercer said softly. "Your mating gland. It withered completely shut down and necrosed due to chemical strangulation and severe scent deprivation. We had to surgically extract the dead tissue to stop the infection from reaching your spinal fluid." The silence in the room was deafening. "I'm dead." I touched the bandage. "Your gland is dead," the doctor corrected gently. "You will live. But you are permanently altered. You will never experience a cycle again. You will never produce slick or nesting hormones. And your scent, it is completely, permanently gone. You are for all biological intents and purposes a null." Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. As the doctor's words sank in, a strange, hysterical warmth bloomed in my chest. Victor Langdon, the ruthless alpha who had bought me, had spent months using my omega biology against me. He had used my instincts, my hormones, and my desperate need for an alpha's scent to keep me paralyzed in his golden cage. He held absolute power because my body recognized him as a dominant force. But my body didn't recognize him anymore. The invisible primal chain he held over me was broken. He hadn't just tortured an omega. He had murdered the omega inside me. And in doing so, he had accidentally set me completely, utterly free. I looked up at Dr. Mercer, a cold, dry smile stretching across my pale lips. "When is Victor getting here?" I asked, my voice steady, devoid of the submissive tremor that had defined my existence for the last half-year. "He's in the waiting room," the doctor replied, looking unsettled by my calm demeanor. He's been demanding to see you. He seems deeply distressed. Let him in, I whispered, settling back against the pillows. Let the Alpha see exactly what he's done. The heavy soundproof door of the hospital room swung open, hitting the rubber stop with a muted thud. Victor Langdon stepped over the threshold, and for the first time since the day my father traded my life for a ledger of debt, the impenetrable, terrifying billionaire looked fundamentally unraveled. His bespoke Armani tuxedo jacket was gone. His pristine white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar and wrinkled. The sharp, meticulously styled lines of his dark hair were disheveled, falling across his forehead in chaotic strands. But it was his eyes that caught my attention. The cold, calculating obsidian gaze that had kept me trapped in a state of constant shivering terror was completely shattered. They were wide, frantic, and entirely feral. The moment he saw me propped up against the sterile white pillows, the heavy, suffocating weight of his alpha aura slammed into the room. It was a torrential flood of dark espresso and sharp petrichor, an overwhelming pheromonal command that just yesterday would have driven me to my knees, forcing my neck to bare in absolute trembling submission. I inhaled deeply. I smelled coffee. I smelled rain, but I felt absolutely nothing. There was no spike of anxiety in my chest. There was no instinctual pull in my lower abdomen. The biological tether that had chained my mind to his dominance had been severed completely. The scent in the room was no longer a weapon. It was just a fragrance entirely devoid of power. I watched him approach my bed, my heart rate steady, my breathing calm, viewing him not as a master, but as a deeply flawed, desperate man. Finian. Victor rasped, his voice cracking as he closed the distance between us in 3 long, urgent strides. He reached out his large hands, trembling violently as they hovered over my shoulders, as if terrified that touching me might break me further. What have these butchers done to you? Why can't I? He stopped, his nostrils flaring wide as he dragged in a harsh breath. He was searching for it. He was searching for the soft, sweet vanilla and cedar scent that he had spent the last 6 months aggressively trying to annihilate. I'm right here, Victor, I replied, my voice completely level. The submissive tremor that usually laced my words was gone. It felt profoundly strange, yet incredibly liberating to speak to him as an equal. Victor's face contorted into a mask of pure primal panic. He couldn't compute the absolute neutrality in my tone. In the animal hierarchy of his mind, an Omega who did not respond to an Alpha's distress was an impossibility. Driven by an instinct he could no longer suppress, he leaned forward, pushing his face into the curve of my neck, right over the thick white bandages that covered the surgical excision site. He inhaled a deep, desperate draw of breath meant to pull my pheromones directly into his scent glands. He met a void. There was only the harsh chemical sting of iodine, the woven cotton of the medical gauze, and the sterile, empty scent of a biological null. The mating gland, the very core of my Omega identity, the beacon that told an Alpha, I am here, I am yours, I am alive, was gone. The psychological backlash was instantaneous and violently catastrophic. In Alpha biology, the sudden absolute loss of a bonded or claimed Omega's scent triggers a severe neurological event known as an alpha drop. It is the body's realization of death. Victor recoiled as if he had been electrocuted. He staggered backward, his hands flying to his own throat as a choked, guttural sound tore from his lips. It wasn't a word. It was the raw, agonizing sound of an animal caught in a steel trap. His knees simply gave out. The ruthless, untouchable CEO of Langdon Enterprises crashed to the linoleum floor, his hands gripping the edge of my mattress. He buried his face in the pristine white blankets, his broad shoulders heaving with violent, uncontrollable sobs. It wasn't just crying. It was a total biological breakdown. The man who had mocked my phantom heats, who had coldly ordered my nesting materials incinerated, was now weeping with such profound devastation that it echoed off the hospital walls. "No, no, no!" Victor wept, his fingers blindly clutching at the fabric of my hospital gown. "Give it back. Please, God, let me smell you. Just once. Finian, please, come back. Come back to me." He was begging a ghost. He was mourning the very thing he had systematically murdered. I looked down at the top of his dark head, watching the mighty Alpha reduced to a pathetic weeping mess at my feet. For months I had dreamed of seeing him brought low. I had fantasized about him, feeling even a fraction of the agony he had inflicted upon me. But now that it was happening, I realized I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt absolutely indifferent. "You can't have it back, Victor," I said, my voice cutting through his sobs like a scalpel. "You starved it. You suffocated it. You killed it. It's gone forever." He wailed a horrific sound of absolute despair and pressed his forehead against my shin, his tears soaking through the hospital blanket. He was trapped in the hell of his own, making a slave to instincts he could no longer satisfy. And for the first time in my life, I was completely free. Victor's psychological collapse was not the end of my story. It was merely the opening gambit. The Alpha drop left Victor bedridden in a psychiatric wing for 3 weeks, completely incapacitated by the phantom grief of a lost mate. He was pumped full of sedatives, a poetic mirror to the very state he had kept me in. During his absence from the corporate throne, the iron-clad walls of Langdon Enterprises began to show their cracks. Dr. Harrison Mercer, the physician who had saved my life, was bound by strict medical ethics. The presence of lethal black market Zifracor 9 in my bloodstream was an automatic trigger for a mandatory report to the federal authorities. 4 days after my surgery, a man in a sharp charcoal suit walked into my hospital room. His badge identified him as Special Agent Benjamin Caldwell, a senior investigator for the Department of Justice's Biochemical Oversight Division. Benjamin was a beta analytical, immune to pheromonal manipulation, and absolutely relentless in his pursuit of corporate corruption. "Mr. Lowell," Benjamin said, taking the seat Victor had vacated days prior. He placed a thick, sealed file on my bedside table. "I'm here to discuss the chemical agent that destroyed your endocrine system. What you went through is a tragedy. But I believe it is also a massive systemic crime." Over the next 3 hours, Benjamin revealed a truth that transformed my personal nightmare into a sprawling corporate conspiracy. Langdon Enterprises wasn't just quietly abusing one collateral Omega. Victor's holding company had secretly acquired the clandestine laboratory manufacturing the lethal synthetic inhibitor. Victor wasn't just torturing you for his own amusement. Finian, Benjamin explained, his eyes narrowed with disgust. He was using you as a prolonged, localized clinical trial. Langdon Enterprises employs thousands of Omegas in their global supply chains. Heat leaves, maternity accommodations, and nesting protocols cost his company hundreds of millions of dollars a year. He intended to introduce microdoses of Zifracor 9 into the ventilation and water supplies of his manufacturing plants. He wanted to biologically neutralize his entire workforce to maximize output. He was testing the chemical on you to find the absolute threshold of suppression before the onset of necrosis. The revelation washed over me, cold and clarifying. I hadn't just been a victim of a cruel Alpha. I had been the canary in the coal mine for a horrific corporate bioweapon. He underestimated the dosage. I murmured, my hand instinctively ghosting over my bandaged neck. Or he didn't care. We need proof, Benjamin stated firmly. We know the shell company that bought the lab, but Victor buried the paper trail. We need the physical hard drives from his private server, the server located in his penthouse. A slow, deliberate smile touched my lips. The penthouse, the fortress where Victor pumped heavy, oppressive alpha pheromones into the air systems to keep anyone's staff security or rivals from entering his private sanctum without breaking down in submissive panic. I can get them, I said. 2 weeks later, under the guise of packing my remaining belongings before officially severing my living contract with Victor, I returned to the penthouse. The air inside was still thick with the residual aggressive scent of Victor's dominance. To the federal agents waiting in the surveillance van down the street, stepping into that apartment would have been like walking into a wall of psychological tear gas. To me, it smelled like stale coffee. I walked past the bewildered security detail, bypassed the biometric locks, using the administrative codes Victor had arrogantly assumed I was too terrified to memorize, and entered his private study. I didn't sweat. I didn't shake. The biological alarms that should have been screaming at me to submit to the Alpha's territory were dead and silent. I found the encrypted server hidden behind the false paneling in his library. It took me exactly 14 minutes to clone the hard drives onto the encrypted flash drive Benjamin had provided. I walked out of the penthouse with the entirety of Victor Langdon's criminal empire nestled in the front pocket of my jacket. The fallout was apocalyptic. The trial of the United States versus Victor Langdon was the media spectacle of the decade. The Department of Justice brought the hammer down with biblical force. Armed with the cloned hard drives, Benjamin Caldwell meticulously unspooled the labyrinthine network of shell companies, illegal human testing protocols, and gross violations of biochemical treaties. Victor was dragged into the courtroom, looking like a ghost of the titan he once was. The psychiatric hold had hollowed him out. He sat at the defense table, his eyes sunken, his posture slumped. He spent the entire trial staring at me as I sat in the gallery, his hands twitching his nose, desperately, pitifully flaring to catch a scent that no longer existed in this world. When it was my turn to take the stand, the courtroom fell deadly silent. I recounted the isolation, the forced administration of the drugs, the agonizing death of my mating gland, and the brutal reality of his corporate aspirations. I spoke not as a broken Omega, but as an untouchable survivor. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all 84 counts, as the judge read the verdict, sentencing Victor to consecutive life sentences in a federal penitentiary, without the possibility of parole. The former billionaire didn't look at his lawyers. He didn't look at the judge. He turned completely around in his chair, locking his broken, tear-filled eyes onto mine. He mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply turned my back on him and walked out of the courtroom, leaving Victor Langdon to rot in a concrete cell forever haunted by the memory of a scent he could never have again. Langdon Enterprises was seized, dismantled, and liquidated by the federal government. A massive victim compensation fund was established for the Omegas, who had already been unknowingly exposed to the lower-grade inhibitors. With the massive settlement I received from the DOJ's restitution order, I didn't buy a yacht or disappear to an island. I bought back my father's logistics company out of bankruptcy. I rebuilt it from the ground up, implementing industry-leading accommodations for Omega workers, turning the very business Victor had used to buy me into an empire of my own. I am Finian Lowell. I have no scent. I have no alpha. I have no biological master. I am entirely my own, and in the ashes of the cage built to break me, I forged an unbreakable crown. If Finian's brutal, unapologetic revenge gave you chills, then hit that like button smash the subscribe icon, and share this video with anyone who loves seeing a toxic billionaire get absolutely dismantled. The justice system might be flawed, but seeing Victor lose his mind, his company and his freedom, was pure satisfaction. Drop a comment below. What was the most satisfying moment of Victor's downfall for you? Don't forget to ring the notification bell for more intense, dark romance dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat.